The Maker created the new Ultimate Universe before being sealed away for 18 months. Tony Stark and his Ultimates must find a way to save the world before his return. In Ultimates, issues 1 through 12 by Deniz. Benny will read issue 1, and I will continue the rest. I hope you enjoy.
Tony Stark turns to watch the news report. It's been 6 months since the Maker's Council attacked New York under the guise of Tony Stark being a terrorist. But they had used the Immortus drive to launch themselves into the future, to escape from the Maker's Council. Tony turns back to his team. Okay, we can fix it, he tells them, though he isn't quite sure how, as he now has a wounded God of Thunder and a super soldier still frozen. But they have 18 months until the Maker is freed. 18 months to come up with a plan to stop him. A mess, Reed Richards as the new Dr. Doom agrees. But Tony smiles, tapping his chest. All right, but we have a time machine. We can fix it, Tony says with determination. He sits with Reed and works on the calculations, determining that they can use the Immortus engine to send things back in time to the 6 months that they lost, establishing a world of heroes so that when the Maker appears, they will have the heroes that he stole facing against him. Tony writes Ultimates on the chalkboard, circling it. It'll be a kind of superhero resistance network created from the post-human catalysts and files that we stole from the Maker, connected by Stark Tech and Common Cause. Tony explains to Doom. Doom glances at the images of the Fantastic Four from Earth 616. You propose that we recreate this other world here, this Earth 616? Doom asks, and Tony nods, explaining that their world needs heroes in order to survive. The images flip to those of the Incredible Hulk. This world is not that one. Realities diverge. The Maker purged himself of mercy. The people in these files are likely dead. This Dr. Doom, who's Reed Richards, says softly. Tony nods, agreeing, but believes that by using science, they can choose likely candidates to take up the mantle. Reed thinks on it for a moment before nodding with his helmeted head. Leave the calculations to me. We'll build your ultimate network 6 months in the past and have your army overnight, he tells him. But while Reed is working on the plan, Tony sets out to free Captain America from the frozen block of ice that he is in. But when Steve Rogers learns what has happened to the world, which includes the fall of America, he doesn't take it well. Though the others are able to eventually calm him down, Thor is another matter. Still with a gaping wound in his chest from their final battle, Tony visits the Asgardians, where Sif is sitting by the side of her king and her lover. How is he, Sif? Tony asks, and she stares at the pools of blood that have collected on Thor. This should be nothing for him, but it was a magical weapon. The blade won't close, she whispers, and Tony offers to help, but Sif shakes her head. It is the gods who grant gifts to mortals, not the other way around. Leave us, she orders. So the work continues. 6 days later, Doom and Tony have worked out the math and have chosen their candidates. They use the catalyst, wrapping them up in Stark Tech, preparing to start their plan, but Steve watches from nearby, shaking his head. It won't work, he tells them. Tony looks at him in surprise as Steve explains that they can't start a revolution from their living room. And heroes don't come out of boxes. It won't work, Steve tells them, motioning to the catalyst that they're going to be sending out. Tony motions to their blackboard calculations. There's some high-level math and engineering at work here, Steve. Hard even for us to understand sometimes. This should work, Tony promises. Tony moves forward, using the Immortus engine to send the catalyst coursing back through time, energy sparking off of the boxes, and they suddenly disappear, everybody pausing for a moment. That was it? I thought it would be more dramatic. Steve calls from the back, and Tony and Doom turn to the news. If their plan had worked, the change would be immediate, but there was nothing. No heroes traveling the skies. Doom shakes his head. It looks worse, measurably worse, he says to Tony, and as they look into it, they realize that most merely turned down the catalyst, preferring to live their ordinary lives. Some tried and failed and even died. Only a few of them actually worked. Tony watching the screen as Spider-Man swings through the city, and he sighs, glancing at Steve. All right, I'll admit it. I have not conquered time travel. Steve nods his head. Until you get a better handle on it, maybe we should stick to time traveling the old-fashioned way, 1 second at a time. But Doom shakes his head. You're overreacting. One does not abandon an experiment simply after one failure. We have to troubleshoot and try again, Doom says, but Tony shakes his head. Steve's right. We killed people, Doom. Ruined lives. I don't care if it puts us at a disadvantage. The Immortus engine is off limits, Tony tells him, and then he turns back to the board. Ultimates 2.0. He writes, circling it. Meanwhile, back in New York City, Hank and Janet, both pest control workers, are called to Flambe's restaurant in the city. The owner has reported something big in their storage area, eating the food and leaving a mess. Hank and his wife enter the area, Hank looking at the man. Don't worry, we'll take care of it. They move through the shadows, shining their lights and looking around. Janet looks over at Hank. Is everything okay, Hank? Pointing out that Hank has seemed distant for several months. Hank sighs, explaining to her that he feels like she'd be better off without him, that she'd be doing something important. She smiles at him, shining her light on some crayon drawings on the wall. We talked about this, Hank. I love you. I love our life together. But I do admit I'd like us to do something more important together, possibly start a family. There's more to life than squashing bugs, you know. She smiles at him. Around the corner, they see the Moloid family cowering in the corner, mother and father trying to protect their kid. Back out on the street, the owner asks if they have found the issue, but Janet whirls on him, anger flashing in her eyes. No way! You got Moloids living down there. From what I could see, an entire extended family. All right, I'll pay double, but you do disposal, the owner says, but Hank and Janet both refuse, explaining that they don't remove anything that has culture. Those are people. You have to draw the line somewhere, she says as they both head back to their van. They begin to drive through the city with Hank beginning to question if they are right about the Moloids. Most people don't see them as anything more than animals. He points out that killing them is not even a crime. Suddenly, Hank hits the brakes as someone floats down in front of him. Hank Pym? Janet Van Dyne? Tony asks from his Iron Man armor in front of their van. We need to talk, he tells them. Hank stares at him for a moment before slamming on the gas and peeling out, screeching around Tony and driving away. Janet looking back in shock. Was that Howard Stark? I thought he was dead. Wait, how did he know our names? Hank, what's going on? Hank looks at her nervously. You know I'd never hurt you no matter what, don't you, Janet? Janet looks at him in confusion, wanting to know what he is talking about, but something slams in front of the van, grinding it to a halt. As the crash settles, Hank looks at Janet. I'm sorry, Janet. I love you. I'm so sorry. Hank is whispering as Tony Stark's original holographic message begins to play, telling them that the Maker took their lives, asking if they want to be heroes. But Tony and the other heroes land in front of the van. It's us that should be apologizing. I'm sorry about the van. We're still figuring out how to do all of this, Tony says, glancing at Sif, and she shrugs. They're still alive. How much more gentle could I have been, Mr. Stark? Tony's helmet slides away as he quickly tries to explain everything, his recording droning away in the background, explaining that they all should have been heroes, but due to the Maker's meddling, Hank was involved in an accident that left him with brain damage. You're Tony Stark! You killed thousands! Janet snaps as she pulls herself into the van. I hope you're not one of those people that believes everything that she hears, Mrs. Van Dyne. He lands in front of her, explaining that the world has been broken, that he and his team of heroes are going to fix it. Captain America steps forward. It's been 6 months and you still haven't accepted our offer. I don't blame you. You must have thought you'd be alone, which is why we've come in person. You won't be alone. We'd be here to help you. You'd be a part of something. Steve begins to tell them, and Janet looks at him in shock for a moment before turning back to Hank. 6 months? What is he talking about, Hank? But Hank can't even look at her. Before the heroes can explain more, Tony is interrupted by the arrival of Captain Britain and his forces. The heroes turn to face him as he speaks in French. Why is the man that you're calling Captain Britain screaming in French? Steve asks as he readies his shield. Tony charges in front of his team. Ultimates, attack! As the heroes fight against the Maker's forces, Hank shows Janet the message that he received, with the offer to make them heroes, the one that he hid from her. I'm so sorry, but I was scared and I didn't want to lose you. She nods in understanding, telling him that she was scared too. But how many mornings did we drag ourselves out of bed? How many nights did we watch the news in fear? I'm tired of being afraid. Aren't you? Janet takes the catalyst orb, activating it. I love you no matter what choice you make. But this is my choice. The orb activates, and in a flash, she is in the Wasp outfit standing there. Janet leaps into the air, charging at the enemy. All right, let's see how this suit works, she shouts with glee, cheering as she shrinks and dodges around blasts, Hank watching her. I don't deserve her, he whispers, but Captain America overhears him as he knocks another enemy to the ground. She doesn't seem to agree. Hank shakes his head. She doesn't know. She hasn't read them. Hank explains that he read all of the files on the other Hank Pym, the one who did horrible things, invented horrible things, did horrible things to his wife. Even in that reality, I'm a mess, a failure, a loser at best, a menace at worst, Hank says, looking at his own orb, the battle raging around him, but Steve shakes his head, blocking another blast with his shield, listening as Hank explains that he is afraid of what he might do. I don't have an answer for you, Henry. Certainly no guarantees. I can only say that that man is not you. His failures are not your failures. His sins, not your sins, Steve explains. Nearby, Tony continues to fight Britain, while Thor and Sif rise above the battlefield, calling down bolts of lightning on Britain's giant warriors. Sif shouts for Thor to stop, as he'll hurt himself. I'm no invalid. I am the god of thunder, and I have been killing giants since the sky was young. Thor bellows as lightning crackles around them. Hank stares at the orb in his hand. No one can make this choice for you, but you've been driving around here with it at an arm's reach for 6 months. I'm no genius, but I think that means something. A look of determination crosses Hank's face from those words from Captain America. Nearby, Britain knocks Tony to the ground, ripping off his helmet, smiling at him. Stupid peasant. Who are you to oppose us? Britain sneers, but Tony hits the rockets, flying away. We're the Ultimates, and there are more of us than there are of you. Tony shouts, Britain looking up in surprise as a shadow falls over them, a massive foot moving through the air, squashing Captain Britain and his army. Janet flies up to Hank's face, smiling at him. And you said there's more to life than squashing bugs, Hank says with a smile. And so the Ultimates were victorious, but not just at defeating Captain Britain, but showing the world that there are heroes out there. Back on Tony's space station, the team watches the news showcasing Giant Man's massive foot. Well, it's an announcement, but what are we announcing? Doom questions, and Tony looks at his gathered team. I think it says, the Ultimates are here, and we're gonna leave a mark.
Washington, D.C., the 4th of July. Secret Service stands out front. Their faces are cloaked by strange technology as they watch the gathering of civilians. Suddenly, there is a warning in their headsets. But the agents don't have time to react as the battle hits them with a loud boom. Civilians scatter in fear. One man pushes past a woman and her daughter, knocking them to the ground as he rushes to escape. It's them! They hate our freedom! They'll kill us all! He shouts. The woman looks up in fear as the villains approach. She holds up a hand to protect her daughter. No, please, don't hurt her, she shouts. But Captain America leans down and helps them to their feet. You've got nothing to fear from us, ma'am. We just want the big man in the big house. The rest of the Ultimates fight the agents around them. When he knows that the woman and the child are safe, Cap turns back to the fight. Okay, Ultimates, let's go save America, he shouts as the heroes break through the fence and rush onto the White House lawn. It was several days ago that Steve had gone to Tony Stark and asked for a crash course in American history that he had missed. Tony nodded and set him up with a holographic display. I just gotta warn you, it ain't pretty, Tony had said, but Steve had to watch. He had to see what befell the country that he loved and had fought for. He saw it all the bloody history, the decades that had passed, the highs and the lows, the arrival of the Maker, the dismantling of the United States, the arrival of Galactus, the mutant riots, the death of JFK, wars, civil unrest. In the present, the Ultimates break through the White House roof, continuing their battle against the Secret Service. Hank still isn't used to fighting inside. He swats more of the agents aside, but bumps his head against the ceiling. As his team continues to fight, Steve stands outside the Oval Office with Tony at his side. I'll give you a choice, with or through, Steve shouts. But the voice that answers him doesn't seem perturbed. Come in, the person calls. The two heroes rush into the office to find someone sitting behind the desk, clad in gold armor and with his feet up. Welcome to the White House, brought to you by Midas. Midas calls with a good cheer. Tony stalks forward, recognizing his father's first suit of armor. That was my father's, he shouts with anger. Midas nods and stands. I thought you'd like it, boy. After your father's betrayal, the assets were all up for grabs. Though, I've made it my own, he says. Tony grows angry, but Steve puts a hand on his arm. Tony, he's just trying to throw you off balance, he says. Midas comes around the desk, welcoming the heroes to his home. Do you like what I've done with the place? He asks. Steve shakes his head. I do not, he growls. Midas shrugs. It's a free country, he jokes. He motions to the two heroes. Let's get down to brass tacks. My associates believe that you and your violent ideology needs to be destroyed. But I am a businessman, so let's make a deal, he suggests. But Steve shakes his head, telling Midas that they are trying to save America. Outside, the last of the agents are down. Hank and Janet lean against the walls, breathing heavily from the fight. Just need to catch my breath, Hank gasps as he returns to his normal size. Midas laughs at Steve's words, pointing out that the soldier has a narrow view of what America is. But Steve stops him. You sure do like the sound of your own voice, but here's the deal. We know what you're doing in the basement, and we're here to put a stop to it. So, with or through? Steve asks again. Midas nods. He whirls quickly, hitting Steve with a blast of energy in the chest that sends him flying. This is private property, and I have a right to defend myself, Midas shouts. He turns and fires another blast at Tony, but Iron Lad manages to block it with his armor. Steve pulls himself from the rubble of the wall and picks up his shield. Okay, through, he hisses. He charges forward, meeting a blow from Midas's armor with his shield. The sound of metal meeting metal ringing through the White House corridors. I am a member of the Hellfire Club, an organization whose members include the Founding Fathers. Do not speak to me of America, Midas bellows. Steve struggles to hold off Midas's assault. Do it, Iron Lad, he shouts. Tony nods and powers up his armor, firing a blast straight through the floor of the Oval Office, bringing them all down in a scattering of debris. As the smoke clears, Steve struggles to his feet to meet Midas. The rest of the Ultimates are still on the ground around him. Steve turns his head, seeing what they've come for. My God, he whispers at the sight of the young woman strapped to a large machine, energy being siphoned from her body. Beautiful, isn't she? My bright and shining star. That's cosmic radiation coming off of her. She produces it naturally. I have bathed her in light for 1 hour every day since we found her. She has changed me, as all great love does, Midas calls. He steps forward in his armor, reaching out a hand for the young woman. We believe that she fell from the future, the victim of some sort of violent expulsion, or perhaps an escape. We don't know. She has never spoken a word, not even her name, he says in awe. Steve looks back to Iron Lad as Tony gets to his feet, asking him to take out the machine, but Tony shakes his head. I can't. That took everything I had. I'm down to basic functions, Tony says. Midas whirls on them and fires another blast that knocks Tony away. Steve rushes forward, throwing his shield, but Midas knocks it aside and grabs Captain America by the throat, lifting him into the air. From compounds found in her blood, we created the cure for cancers. She powers half of Maryland and Virginia. And my armor. She is America, Captain, Midas gloats. He throws Steve to the ground and kicks him hard. "Have to save America," Steve gasps as he struggles to stand. Midas stands over him. "Save it? You barely know the place," he says in disgust as he kicks Steve again. "The United States was a fine idea for its time, but it served its purpose. We cut out what was difficult and saved what was profitable," Midas says, watching as Steve struggles back to his feet. "Free America," he gasps through swollen lips. His body was broken and bleeding, and Midas hits him again. Unaware of Janet struggling to her feet as her wasp sting was powering up. "America is dead. Long live the North American Union and regional subsidiaries," Midas cheers. Janet aims her blast, rolls right off the tongue. She hisses as she fires. The machine sparks and explodes, losing all power. The heroes struggle to their feet and launch an assault against Midas. "He's lost his power source," Tony shouts, but Midas continues to fight them off. "You can't have her! I love her!" Midas bellows, but Steve rises up behind him, grasping his shield. "Love her? You don't even know her name," he growls as he slams the shield into Midas's neck. The villain crumbles to his knees and slides to the floor. I believe you broke my neck, Captain," Midas gasps from the floor, unable to move. Captain America nods. "Gold's soft metal," Steve says, sinking to his knees after the beating he took. But Midas just coughs and laughs, telling the heroes that if they take the woman, there will be consequences. But Steve stands and crosses the room, helping the young woman down from the remains of the machine. "It's okay, miss. We're here to help," he says as he lifts her up. "A great injustice was done to you. Things will be better now," he says. "Do you know your name?" he asks as the heroes stagger out of the White House. Still groggy, she nods. "America," she whispers. The Pacific Proving Grounds. Waves gently lap at the shore of an island. Birds call out as they swoop through the air, but the piece is destroyed. In the distance, a massive bomb detonates, sending a green mushroom cloud into the sky. The people of the island look up in shock. A wave of debris and disturbed earth rushes towards them, showering the island in glowing green snow. The children don't know any better. They reach out and touch it, rubbing it on their skin with smiles on their faces. 80 million tons of radiation fallout bathes the island, changing it forever. But this was the plan. Exposure to gamma radiation needed to be studied. Soon, the island is dubbed Monster Island. The present day, magical lightning cracks from the sky. When the light fades, Iron Lad, Thor, and Sif stand amongst the radioactive fauna of Monster Island. "This must be it. Gamma readings are off the chart," Tony says, scanning their surroundings from the safety of his armor. Thor nods and tightens his grip on his hammer. "Yes, I can feel it on my skin. It reminds me of boyhood summers in Muspelheim," he notes. Suddenly, the trees are pushed aside as a massive lizard charges them, roaring. Amazing! That thing violates the square cube law and half a dozen others. It shouldn't exist, Tony shouts. But Thor and Sif have experience fighting giant serpents and things that shouldn't exist, and rush the creature. In moments, they are standing over its smoking remains. "Ha! I was expecting more of a fight," Thor scoffs. Tony stares at them in shock. "You didn't have to kill it," he says quietly. They begin to make their way through the island, with Tony marveling at the strange species and mutations that the gamma radiation has caused. This place is unbelievable. Decades of gamma exposure have produced flora and fauna like nothing else on Earth, he says, picking up a massive crab that clacks at him. He holds it up in wonder, but Sif quickly draws her sword and cuts it in half, letting its purple blood leak to the floor. Stop doing that! Everything here could be one of a kind. Every death is a potential extinction event, Tony says. Thor pushes through the bushes, looking back at his young friend. You misunderstand the nature of this island. It is more than merely wild. This is a poisoned place. A place at war with itself. It would destroy us if it could, Thor tells him. Tony shakes his head, reminding them that this place has been wiped off every map, and the ocean surrounding it has been surrounded by a reef of radioactive battleships. This place is impossible to reach by normal means. I think he was born here, Tony says. Sif looks at him, questioning, but suddenly, there is a roar and a green monster leaps from the shadows of the jungle, slamming Thor into the ground and stepping on his head. Tony turns to meet it, but the monster whirls and slams a fist into him, knocking him away. Sif is knocked aside by a thunderclap before she can even react. The heroes gather themselves and stare at the green monster as it roars at them. This one's strong, Thor says with a smile as he readies Mjolnir. Is that what you're looking for? Sif asks as she draws her blade. But Tony isn't sure. The monster roars again and charges at them. Decide quickly, lad, Thor says as a magical lightning begins to crackle around his hammer. He whirls the weapon and throws it, but the monster blocks the attack, stopping the hammer in the palm of his hand before knocking Thor away with a punch. Sif leaps forward, her sword slashing against the creature's skin, but the blade does nothing. It barely notices, Iron Lad shouts as he peppers the monster with energy blasts. But Thor has recovered. He whirls his hammer and hits the creature hard, sending it to the ground. Rising up into the air, he calls forth the lightning. I'm afraid it's time for another extinction event, lad, Thor bellows as he prepares to strike. But a voice calls out to them. Stop! A woman yells. The heroes turn to see a female Hulk clad in island garb, stepping into the clearing. I am Leori Joanna Zakaria, protector of this atoll and everything on it. You are intruders. Stop now or accept my consequences, she says. Thor lowers his hammer and glances at Tony. Well, she is uncommonly eloquent for a monster, and comely, he says softly. Tony steps forward, trying to explain that they mean no harm, but Leori walks past them to the monster. Huh, I've heard that before, Leori says, as she takes the monster in her arms and begins to soothe it with a song. As the creature calms, it begins to shrivel in size, until it is only a baby in Leori's arms. The heroes look on in shock. Leori looks up at them, explaining that she and her tribe are the people of this island, that they were approached by Banner and his scientists, and when the islanders asked them to leave, Banner and his people tested their bombs anyway, and left us to live in the fallout, Leori says. She stands and begins to carry the child away, but Tony follows her. There are others like you? This could change the balance of power. An incredible Hulk army, Tony says. Leori glances over her shoulder at him. Oh yes, there are more of us. Come and see, she says softly. She leads them to her village, but instead of powerful Hulks, the village is full of those who have been twisted and mutated into monsters by the gamma radiation. Some live in constant agony in their horrible bodies, while the lucky few have been mutated into monsters. Leori glances down at the baby, explaining that he transforms when he becomes angry, and that he tore his mother apart when he threw a tantrum once. She turns back to Tony and the others. We are the lucky ones, the ones who survived. All of us are sick and changed forever. Even the sand here is sick, Leori tells them. Tony tries to tell her that they want to fight against the injustice that did this to them, to fight against Banner and the others. We need you in this war, Tony tells her, with Thor and Sif backing him up. But Leori explains that they can't trust Tony any more than they could trust Banner before him. She leans down over the much shorter Iron Lad. You want my strength? You want my rage? Then you'll have to pay for it, she says. She motions to the island around them. Fix our island. Make it like it was before the bombs, she says. Tony looks around, his eyes widening as he tries to conceive of a way to make that happen. This is my price. Fix our land, Leori repeats. Sif puts a hand on Tony's shoulder. You said from the beginning that you wanted to fix the world, didn't you? She asks. Tony nods and holds out his hand, shaking Leori's and entering an agreement. But none of them know that someone is watching. Banner stares at the monitors as he watches Tony and his team reach an agreement with Leori. His massive hand tightens into a fist. No, this won't do. Assemble the immortal weapons. These ultimates are starting to make me angry. 15 months remain. Sometime later, in the quiet of his lab, Doom stands before a projector hooked to the Immortus engine. Images begin to appear of a past that might have been. A young Reed Richards sits in a college classroom, holding up his hand to answer a teacher's question. Reed and his 3 friends are sitting on their ship, prepared to head into space to conduct his experiment. The 4, now transformed by cosmic radiation, become superheroes, using their powers and skills to help protect the Earth. A young Reed meets his college roommate, Ben Grimm, and the two shake hands. Test pilot Ben Grimm activates the rocket, preparing to take the journey that will change their lives. Reed Richards meets Susan Storm, the love of his life. The rocket blasts off into space. Doom watches as Reed explains his theories and experiments. The group blasts off into space, but something is wrong. Reed's calculations were wrong. Alarms begin to blare. Johnny bursts into flames on the flight and begins to scream. The capsule drops back down to Earth, landing in the ocean. More images. Ben Grimm thanks Reed for getting him on the project, knowing that it will help his career as a pilot. Ben Grimm, dead, at the bottom of a pit of rocks. His death ruled a suicide. Reed and Sue's first kiss. Sue dying in a hospital bed. The cosmic radiation from their flight slowly killed her. Reed wrote down his calculations for the flight, sure that he was right. Reed looks up to find himself in a room. The Maker stood over him with a smile. Hello, Doom. Welcome to your brand new universe, the Maker says. Reed looks at him in confusion. Months seem to pass in the blink of an eye, and he has a beard. What's going on? Where am I? Reed asks. The Maker is doing his own calculations. They are in the room again. Doom, doom, doom. I control the 4th dimension. I can squeeze centuries of pain into just a few moments, the Maker explains. The images shift again, and Reed is strapped to a strange device. There must be some kind of mistake. I'm not this Doom, Reed shouts. Energy pulses through his body, and he screams with pain. The Maker leans over him. I am the Maker. I do not make mistakes, the Maker explains. The images shift. The company won't back Reed's decision to go into space. The craft needs at least 4 to make the trip. Reed leans down to Sue. "What about your brother, Johnny?" he whispers, explaining that he wants to move forward, that he knows he's right. The machine continues, now beginning to stretch Reed's limbs. "You make mistakes, don't you, Doom? Mistakes that kill friends, ruin lives, mistakes that blow up in your face. That's you, Doom," the Maker says. "Please, please, I'm Reed! I'm Reed!" Reed shouts as pain courses through his body. "Please, why are you doing this?" he whispers. The images shift again. Reed's face has been ravaged. Now it is twisted and melted. "Doom is your name. I'm as sure of it as I am my own. Everything you touch, everything you are, everything you love, all doomed. Accept this and be free," the Maker says over Reed's screams. The Maker shifts around him and begins to tinker with Reed's mind. "Doom is what you bring. Doom is who you are. Now say it. What are you?" the Maker demands. The mask slips over Reed's face. The burning metal sizzled against his skin. The image shifts. Doom stands with the Maker. "I am Doom," Doom bellows. Tony's voice calls out to Doom, and he quickly moves to shut down the projector. "Doom, are you here?" Tony says as he walks into the quiet lab. "You missed another mission. We really needed you. If it wasn't for America, Giant Man would be dead," Tony says. He looks around, asking what Doom has been doing. Doom turns away, casting his eyes downward. "I suffer from periods of extreme despair. During these episodes, I am negatively charged, lost in an all-consuming universe where nothing is possible. I call it my negative zone," Doom explains. But he turns back, promising to try and communicate better in the future. Tony rubs the back of his head. "I didn't know that. I'm sorry, Doom," he says sincerely. Doom turns, showing Tony what he has been working on. "I have been working on Project 4. Progress has been made, as you can see," he says, motioning to the cage with the superpowered mice inside. But Doom admits that he is having trouble finding the correct dose of cosmic radiation, and that the mice keep dying. "The mutations are highly unstable. The mice keep dying," he says with a sigh. Tony offers to help, but Doom shakes his head. "This is something I must do on my own," he rumbles. "Don't be stubborn, Doom. We can't let your ego jeopardize," Tony begins to say. But Doom whirls on him, anger flashing in his eyes. "The billionaire boy king, pampered since the womb, accuses me of ego?" Doom asks, pointing out that it was Tony's refusal to use the Immortus engine that is forcing him to do this. "We killed people," Tony reminds him, but Doom shakes his head. "And how many lives has the Maker destroyed?" Doom demands. He points at Tony, shouting that he has no idea of real loss. "Perhaps you will one day, but I hope not," Doom says, calming. He turns back to the cage and reaches down, picking up the mouse that was stretching out, that now had no form and had melted into a puddle. "I have always felt incomplete, that something was missing, even as a boy. When I read the Maker's files, I at last saw the shape of this absence, the knowledge of reality's incompleteness. It is an awful burden. It changes you, makes you into something you never imagined you could be," Doom says softly as he holds up the formless mouse. "I would tear down this world stone by stone to make it right again," Doom says softly. He looks up, seemingly remembering that Tony was in the room, and turns away. "When the mice stop dying, the Fantastic Four will return," Doom says. Tony nods and turns to leave. "Iron Lad," Doom calls out, giving Tony pause. A moment passes. "Please close the door behind you. I have work to do," Dooms says as he stares at the mice. Only 14 months remain. Aboard the secret Stark satellite known as the Triskelion, images of destruction flash across a screen in front of Tony Stark. He looks over his shoulder as Steve Rogers comes into the room. "Steve, we got a problem," Tony says with a sigh. He shows Steve the images, explaining that over the last several months, several Roxxon sites have been hit by an eco-terrorist. The weapons used were a cutting-edge, self-printing, smart projectile weapon system designed by Tony himself. "So, arrows?" Steve says as he looks at the specs. Tony explains that the weapon was sent to someone on the maker's list. "The man was supposed to be the hero Hawkeye, but he rejected our offer," Tony explains. "Threw them in the trash can, you mean?" Steve says with a nod. Tony agrees, but explains that someone else picked up the weapons and is now using them. Steve looks at the reports again. "Tony, I'm not seeing the problem. This is what you wanted. Citizens taking up arms against the Council, its allies, and its infrastructure?" Steve points out. Tony nods in agreement, but explains that he doesn't want anyone else getting hurt. He looked into the man using the arrows. "I finally had a chance to run this person's numbers. It doesn't look good, Steve. Their heroism score was in the bottom 10th percentile, and on the villain potential index," Tony explains. But Steve stops him. "Some things aren't captured in numbers, Tony. I thought you'd learned that after what happened last time," Steve says. Tony nods again, but explains that he doesn't want these weapons in the hands of someone he doesn't trust, that he doesn't want to be responsible for any more deaths. Steve finally agrees. "I'll take care of it," he says with a sigh. Later, at the Roxxon refinery, 1.5 miles from the Missouri River, Captain America raises his hands slowly. The terrorist takes careful aim with a repulsor arrow. "So they sent a cowboy, huh?" Hawkeye asks. "Charlie Ramsey. You know why I'm here?" Steve asks the young Native American. Hawkeye shrugs. "You're one of those ultimates. Shouldn't you be blowing up a school or something?" he asks. Steve motions to the refinery destruction around them. "Blowing things up seems to be your thing," he points out. Hawkeye smiles as he fires an arrow. "Draw, cowboy!" he shouts. Steve moves quickly, leaping over the arrow and drawing his shield. But the repulsor arrow suddenly turns in the air and comes back at him, slamming into Steve and knocking him away. Hawkeye reaches back and crafts another arrow as Steve struggles to his feet. "I know all about cowboys," Hawkeye says, pointing out that even though the old movies showed cowboys killing Indians, his father always loved them. He fires a sonic arrow that goes screaming past Steve, stunning him briefly. But Steve gets back up quickly. "Stop, I didn't come here to fight. I just need those weapons back. They're dangerous. You can't be much older than 16, Steve shouts. Hawkeye stares at him. "How old were you when you put on that suit? Took a stand?" he asks, demanding to know why Steve is allowed to be a hero. "The guy who made this, Tony Stark, he gets to be a hero. But me? I don't meet the criteria? I failed a test or something?" Hawkeye asks, aiming for Steve's head, but he raises the arrow at the last second. "You know what they do, these Roxxon energy partners?" Hawkeye asks as he lets loose the arrow, and it opens up in the air, releasing a dozen cluster bombs that fall all around Steve, who backflips away. "They do whatever they want," Hawkeye says, explaining that they destroy the land and poison the drinking water. And when his people try to fight back and protest, to stand up for what they believe in, they kill us, or throw us in jail, or force us off our land, he snaps. Steve lands and whirls, throwing his shield. It bounces off a wall and comes at Hawkeye from the side. But Charlie draws an inertia-canceling arrow and fires. The arrow hits the shield, and they both drop to the ground. "This life is a burden. You don't have to take it on," Captain America tells him. But Charlie shakes his head, explaining that when he found this weapon, Tony told him that he could be a hero. "He was talking to someone else," Steve explains. "I know!" Charlie shouts, but explains that the vision isn't important, that it is the person that gives it power and meaning. He keeps firing arrows at Captain America, who dodges and attacks. Steve finally has had enough and rushes forward. He grabs an arrow out of the air and snaps it, tossing his shield at the last moment to knock Charlie to the ground. Charlie falls to the ground, the bow clattering away. He looks up to see Captain America standing over him. Just like the movies, cowboy wins, an Indian dies. Everybody cheers. Charlie sighs. But Steve reaches down and helps him to his feet. No one's dying. Get up and use those eyes, Steve says as he turns to the sound of approaching vehicles. Charlie turns his targeting vision to the other end of the refinery, where Roxxon mercenaries have arrived, loaded for a war. There's 1,000 of them, Charlie whispers in surprise. Steve nods and retrieves his shield. I tried to tell you, what you're doing is dangerous. That is a Roxxon cleanup crew, Steve tells him. He picks up the bow and hands it to Hawkeye. Tony told me that with proper training, an operator could stop a small army with this weapon. I hope you've been practicing, Steve tells him. The two charge forward, meeting the Roxxon mercenaries head on. Later, as the last of the soldiers fall, Captain America and Hawkeye stand victorious. Not bad, Hawkeye. Not bad at all, Captain America says with a smile. We should get out of here. More will be coming, Steve says as he starts to walk away, but Hawkeye is confused. What about our fight? Don't you want your arrows back? He asks. Steve shakes his head. No, I was never gonna take them back. I just wanted to be sure before I told Iron Lad that he didn't miss his target, he says with a smile. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Bruce Banner watches the battle on the monitors, ignoring the head of Roxxon's complaints. He knows the only way to destroy the Ultimates. He has been studying them. The Ultimates operate as an insurgency. You can't destroy an insurgency piece by piece, he explains. He turns away from the monitors, anger flashing over his brutish face. I'm going to kill them all at once, he growls. 13 months remain. Beneath the earth, Tony Stark stands before the doorway to a damage control black site. He turns back to his team, the fully gathered members of the so-called Ultimates, for the first time. Tony looks at them all. The Human Torch, Hawkeye, Sif, Thor, Captain America, Wasp, Giant Man, She-Hulk, and America Chavez. The only member missing was Doom, who had stayed behind on the secret satellite to conduct experiments on the time travel device. The heroes all look determined, and Tony nods. This is a rescue mission, Tony tells them, explaining that hacking into the Council's overnet had led them to information about this superpowered prison within the damage control black site. The Council's getting nervous, and the prisoners are set to be executed tomorrow, unless we do something about it, Tony continues. Giant Man raises his hand. Should we all just be standing out in front of the secret facility like this? He asks. She-Hulk glances at him, but shrugs and nods at the good question. Captain America turns back to the heroes, explaining that they want to get the prisoners and get out, and not get involved in a drawn-out battle. Tony turns back, his helmet sliding into place as he powers up his gauntlet lasers. No one dies today, not because of us. This is a rescue mission, he repeats as he fires and blows the doors off the hinges. The heroes charge in. Ultimates, assemble! Tony starts to say, but his words trail off as he looks around at the vast city before them. A magnificent sky blazes overhead, full of more stars than anyone can count. Sitting before them is the Hulk, surrounded by his acolytes as he pours a cup of tea. He glances up at them. At last, patience is a tree with bitter roots that bears sweet fruits. Will you join me for some tea? He asks politely. But She-Hulk is not polite. She bellows with rage as she rushes at the monster who poisoned her island. Banner! She bellows as she leaps through the air. But Hulk merely smiles. Joanna, I haven't seen you since you were a child. You've grown, he says as he avoids her blows, merely dodging around them. Hate has made me strong, and I have been saving all my hate for you, she shouts as she continues to try and punch him. Banner nods as his fist begins to glow. Rage can be a devastating weapon in the right hands, Hulk says as he hits the woman with the atomic iron fist, launching her into the air until she lands hard enough to create a crater. With a sigh, Hulk returns to his seat, crossing his legs and motioning towards his visitors. Now, how about that tea? I made enough for everyone, he says simply. Meanwhile, back at the satellite, Doom is watching the monitors and is shocked as the entire team's locators go offline at once. What have you gotten yourself into now, Iron Lad? Doom whispers to himself. Back in the city, America turns back to the entrance to find that the door is gone and there's only a brick wall. We're trapped, she shouts. Iron Lad looks at Hulk, demanding to know where they are. Hulk smiles as he pours them tea. I have brought you to heaven, the immortal city of Kunlun to be precise. I rule all 7 of heaven's capital cities, Hulk explains. The Ultimates prepare for a fight, Iron Lad out front. Don't be afraid of him. There's 10 of us. He is still just one man, he says to his team. Hawkeye nods and draws an arrow. One giant radioactive man, he scoffs. Hulk holds out the tea for his guest, but sighs when he realizes that they aren't going to accept his offer, and he motions to his acolytes, who stand and ready themselves. They hold up syringes of green liquid and jab themselves. I'd hoped we could be civil about this. I made tea. The tea is a much more peaceful death, he says to Iron Lad. The acolytes begin to transform, their bodies warping into green monsters. Hulk nods. I suppose the time for tea is over, he whispers. The immortal weapons of the Hulk stand ready and launch themselves at the heroes. Meanwhile, Doom is continuing to search for his lost comrades. This is impossible. These instruments should be able to find them anywhere in the universe, he whispers as he taps the computer. The Ultimates launch themselves into the battle, with Iron Lad rushing at Hulk. This is what you wanted, isn't it? My attention? My anger? Hulk asks. He dodges a laser blast and kicks down at Iron Lad, driving him into the ground with the thermonuclear thunderfoot. Well, congratulations! You have officially made me angry! Hulk growls as he grinds Tony into the ground. Human Torch, Hawkeye, and Captain America launch an attack against another acolyte, but their blows seem to just bounce off the enemy. Heaven's a lot more violent than I thought it would be, Hawkeye notes as his arrow bounces off his opponent. Giant Man and Wasp fight against Fat Cobra, who collides with Giant Man and brings him down. You're supposed to be pacifists. I listened to the Hulk's audiobook about it, Hank grunts. Janet buzzes around Fat Cobra's head and hits him with wasp stings. Sorry, honey. People will say anything to sell books, she says to her husband. Hulk smiles as Tony struggles to his feet. The other Ultimates are falling around him. Sif is knocked from the air, and Thor is surrounded. You call yourselves heroes? You're just children, Hulk scoffs as he strikes Tony again, breaking through his shields. I will teach you about power and the real world, he says as he hits Tony again, knocking him away. But Doom has finally reconnected with Iron Lad's visual feed, and his eyes widen in shock as he watches the battle. Thor is brought down. Sif falls next. Fat Cobra whirls on Janet and plucks her out of the air. He opens his mouth wide and bites down, seemingly swallowing her whole. Hulk stands over Iron Lad, whose shields flicker as they try to come back online. Hulk smiles as his fist begins to glow. You know, as the worldwide symbol of peace, I've missed blood on my hands. I wonder if Gandhi ever felt this way, Hulk says as he slams both fists down on Iron Lad, crushing him into the ground. Back in his lab, Doom is already working fast, trying to figure out the calculations for his plan to work. The teleportation device is nearby. In heaven, Hank bellows with rage as he grows even larger. Jan! I'll kill you! He screams at Fat Cobra as he brings his fist down, but the gamma-powered acolyte stops the blow and laughs. But something is wrong. His stomach begins to quake, and blood flies from his mouth. Suddenly, he is ripped apart from the inside as Janet enlarges inside of him. She gasps for air and collapses to the ground. Her body is still smoking from stomach acid. Back at the lab, Doom puts his plan into motion. 7 seconds and 7,000 unknowns. One mistake and everyone is dead. Again. He whispers as he activates the teleportation device. Hulk tosses Iron Lad's shattered body away. I should thank you. Blowing up pipelines, destabilizing power grids, burning down the White House. You've only driven them deeper into our arms. Nothing makes one crave the status quo quite like a violent threat to it. In time, they'll come to wonder if you ever truly existed. If the whole thing wasn't an elaborate conspiracy. If you didn't really work for us all along. Hulk says as he stomps forward. Tony looks around weakly. His team has fallen. The Gamma Acolytes stand victorious. In a way, I suppose you did, Hulk says as he reaches down and picks Tony up. Rest now, little Stark. You've earned it. In the end, you were our best little soldier. Hulk says softly as he crushes Tony between his hands. His armor and body shattering as Hulk drops him to the ground. No! Joanna shouts as she leaps forward, slamming into the Hulk and knocking him away. She brings him to the ground and hits him again and again. You destroy everything! Enough! She bellows. But Hulk catches her next blow. I'm impressed. In a different world, your spirit might count for something, he says as he crushes her hand, shattering it. He pushes her off and stands tall, his fist glowing once more. But this is not that world. Take heart though. Your defeat will avoid a wider conflict. Your sacrifice saves millions of lives, he says as he prepares to strike. But Doom activates his plan, and the Hulk stares in shock as the entire team suddenly disappears before his eyes. Doom lets out a sigh of relief as his plan works, and the Ultimates reappear on the station. Everyone begins to pick themselves up, but are startled by Joanna's cry of anguish. They all turn to see her cradling Tony's body. No, you were too late. Iron Lad is dead, she wails. Only 12 months remain until the Maker returns. As they walk through the streets of Brooklyn, Steve Rogers looks down at the newspaper in his hand that asks the question, who are the Ultimates? Where did you even find a physical newspaper? They put everything in this thing called the internet now. Jim Hammond, the Human Torch, says at his side. Steve sighs and smiles at his old friend. Don't do that, Jim. You're as old as I am, Steve reminds him. But Jim shakes his head and reminds Steve that he's been rebuilt several times. So technically, he is younger. Finally, they round a corner and find the bar that Steve had been talking about. See, I told you I knew where I was going, Steve says with a smile. The two sit down in the ale house, with Steve reminiscing about how he and Bucky used to come here before the war. But Jim knows what they really need to talk about. Look, Steve, you and I both know where this is all going. War's coming. A fire will grow. We've been through this before, but the others? You saw how shaken they were after Tony. They're not used to losing people. They aren't ready for it, Jim tells him. Steve nods his head and looks at his friend. Then we'll have to get them ready, he says simply. Jim nods and sighs. I wish we didn't, he says softly. Steve puts a hand on his friend's shoulder as their beers arrive. Me too, he agrees. Nearby, the television plays the memorial event for the attack on New York. Steve and Jim watch for a few moments before raising their drinks and clinking the glasses. To all the ones who don't get saved, we are so sorry, Steve toasts. And to Tony, who brought us together, we'll try not to let you down, Jim responds. At the event, Hank and Janet stand on the ground, listening as Father Murdoch gives his speech. But Hank is uncomfortable. Although coming was his idea, now he is worried that someone will recognize them as members of the Ultimates. But Janet shakes her head, reminding him that they have never been seen outside of their costumes or without masks. Hank nods, but he is still nervous. People have died because of us, Jan. Innocent people. Directly or indirectly. I thought it would be good if we could mourn together, he says. Janet nods and kisses her husband on the forehead. It was a good idea, Hank. Besides, after coming back from heaven, we're supposed to be laying low, she says. But some members of the Ultimates have different ideas. At a nearby Oscorp warehouse, Hawkeye is continuing his crusade. The security guard raises his hands as the archer aims his arrow. Please, we don't want any trouble. We just work here, the guard says. One of the workers nods and puts up his own hands. Just tell us what we need to do to get out of here alive, man, he begs. Hawkeye smiles and adjusts his aim slightly. Stay very still, he warns. Arrows fly through the air quickly, passing by all the workers and embedding in the boxes of weapons. Moments later, the arrows detonate, leaving the warehouse smoking and destroyed. And when the workers turn back, Hawkeye is gone. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the world, protesters are shouting for freedom and democracy, waving signs and protesting peacefully, but their government doesn't care. Police have arrived, tear gas is thrown, and weapons are brought out. But there is a light in the sky. The hero, known as America, descends on the crowd and turns her glowing eyes and power upon the police. Their armor begins to melt and fuse until they are trapped inside and fall to the floor. The protesters look on in shock as she smiles and waves at them before disappearing into the sky and teleporting all the protesters home. Meanwhile, outside the realm of Earth, Thor and Sif walk towards the World Tree, which gives them access to the 9 realms. Sif explains that she told the others that she and Thor had spent too much time on Midgard, that they need to tend to the other realms, where they would sow chaos against the All-Father Loki. The Asgard rebellion begins now, so where should we start, Thor? She asks. Meanwhile, floating high above Earth, on the secret satellite that acts as a base for the Ultimates, She-Hulk slams Doom into the wall, demanding that he send her back to the island, to her people. Joanna, as I said, I cannot, Doom gasps. But Joanna slams him into the wall again. But Doom is calm, explaining that if she returns, she will be captured by the Hulk, and they will peer into her mind and learn of the station's location and destroy them all. They will discover everything about us, he says calmly. She-Hulk's face softens as she realizes the truth of his words. But my people need me, she says softly, lowering Doom to the ground. He nods. Perhaps I can tap into the Hulk's surveillance system. You won't be able to be there with them, but you'll be able to see that they are safe, he offers. She nods. Thank you. That will be better, she says as they both look down at the stasis tank, which holds Tony Stark, still mending, unconscious. We must keep going. We owe it to him. We owe it to them all, Doom says softly. She-Hulk nods and reaches out a hand, placing it on Tony's tank where he floats gently. Only 11 months remain until the Makers return. After the battle in Paradise against the Hulk and his acolytes, the Ultimates have gone underground. Their work continues, but now it is quieter. But the work of the Council also continues. Nick Fury stands on the bridge of his helicarrier, watching the monitors as his agents work beneath him. One of the monitors shows a man at home with his family. They are in their backyard, grilling hamburgers under a sunny sky. You wouldn't know it just looking at the man, but this man is a terrorist. You wouldn't know to look at his criminal record, or the charity work that he does, or the friendly things he does to help his neighbors. But last Tuesday, after a few too many with friends, Keith turned to someone he shouldn't have and said, "Do you ever wonder if these Ultimates might have a point?" This is what makes Keith a terrorist. Above him, the sky has suddenly gone dark as a storm cloud rolls in. Lightning suddenly arcs from the sky and strikes him dead. His family screams in panic as Nick Fury watches. He turns to the agent working the controls. "Nice work, Agent. You throw a mean lightning bolt," Fury comments. High above Keith's home, where hand agents have already arrived and begun searching the premises, the hand helicarrier continues onward, disguised as an endless lightning storm as it continues the work that the Makers set before Director Fury. Fury smiles and turns away from the monitors. "Another day making the world safe," he says to himself. He turns from the bridge and makes his way through the carrier, passing agents leading an anthropomorphic duck in handcuffs. As he arrives at a meeting room, he checks his watch. 35 minutes. Inside the room, the Council awaits him, sitting before a holographic image of the Earth. "Thank you for waiting," Fury says as he stands before the most powerful people on Earth. Captain Britain, ruler of Europe and the East Coast of North America. Emmanuel da Costa, leader of the Society of South America and the Black King of the Hellfire Club. The Rasputins, the mutant czars of Eurasia and Limbo. Emperor Sunfire and Viper, Emperor of Hinokuni. Ra and Khonshu, lords of the upper and lower kingdoms of Africa. And the incredibly enlightened Hulk, ruler of Asia and the west coast of North America. Fury looks around at them all. Their faces betray that they do not like to be kept waiting. But Fury doesn't answer them. He answers directly to the Maker himself. "Glad you could all make it. I've been meaning to get you all together for a while now," Fury tells them, watched over by a smiling image of the Maker himself. He paces the room, explaining that he has been monitoring the Ultimates for some time and begins to update the Council on their current activities. But as he speaks, Fury's mind begins to wander down the pathways of his memories, fighting against the Nazis and eventually becoming a spy. But then, things become blurry. He was wounded in 1944 and was approached by the Maker. Suddenly, his mission changed. He was hunting superhumans, leading the Hand. But Britain interrupts his briefing and his train of thought. "Enough of this tiresome backstory. We already know what the Ultimates have done. Give us something new," Captain Britain snorts out of boredom. Fury nods. "Well, following Dr. Banner's failure in Kunlun," Fury begins, but the Hulk roars and smashes the desk before him, his eyes flashing a dangerous green. "Careful, Director. I have recently rediscovered an appreciation for mindless violence. I know that I killed the Stark boy. I felt him die in my hands," Hulk growls. Fury nods and holds up his hands, glancing quickly at his watch. 19 minutes. "There's good news," Fury says. motioning to the hologram, which begins to show images of the hand's efforts at spinning the narrative, showing the world that the Ultimates are truly terrorists and out to get them. 12 minutes. Omega Red grunts and waves away the idea.
An information war? What about a war?
He growls, saying that they should hunt these Ultimates down and kill them and their families. End this once and for all. Fury nods. We're working on it. Their technology is decades ahead of anything we found outside of the city. Besides Tony Stark, the identities of the Ultimates are closely kept secrets. They could be anyone, Fury explains. Emmanuel sighs and stands. So you have nothing, he says as the others join him and they head for the door. But Fury calls for them to stop. Wait, there's more, he says. He motions to the 3 random civilians that enter the chamber. With an order from Fury, the civilian disguises fall away to reveal 3 hand agents. These are our men in Wakanda, Hinokuni, and New York, embedded with what we believe are likely the future recruits of the Ultimates, Fury explains. But the Council is not happy with the idea of agents operating in their territories without their permission. You forget yourself, Fury. You work for us, members of the Council snap. The Fury isn't scared, and he shakes his head. No, we all work for the same person, don't we? He asks, glancing at the image of the Maker. Fury also explains that they might have an informant inside the Ultimates themselves. But the fewer people that know, the better. For security, Fury explains. Hulk growls and steps before him, anger once again flashing in his eyes.
Are you implying that we are security risks? That the Ultimates have spies in our organization?
The Hulk demands. But Fury doesn't back down. They could be anyone, he says easily. He glances at his watch. 5 minutes. The Council begins to argue amongst themselves, and once again, Fury is lost in his memories. Memories that shift and change, so that he isn't sure what is real anymore. Captain Britain notices that his eyes are closed. I'm sorry, Fury. Are we boring you? He asks. Fury finally opens his eyes. The timer has reached 0. Always, but now you have my full attention. Initiate self-destruct sequence. Fury override code 29448Z84H/D. Fury calls out. The countdown begins and Fury draws his pistol. He is known for some time that everything the Council has done is evil. That his mission under the Maker has been evil. His memories are scattered. Maybe from being wounded in 1944. Maybe from something else. But now he must redeem himself. He must help fix the world before it is too late. Fury smiles as he aims his pistol. Come on, don't tell me you weren't half expecting this, he says, explaining that in a few seconds, the helicarrier will detonate and kill them all. I just had to make sure we were far enough away from anywhere inhabited. I've got enough blood on my hands, Fury says softly. His resolve hardens. I figure they've got a chance now. With you out of the way, with us out of the way. They've got a chance. That's gotta count for something, Fury says, almost to himself. Finally, the countdown ends and Fury smiles. See you all in hell, he grunts. But nothing happens, and his eyes widen in shock. The Council stares at him for a moment before they all burst out laughing. His face gets me every time, someone says. I suppose it's that time again. They barely last a year now, someone else laughs. Fury doesn't understand as they all keep laughing. Someone asks if he wrote a confession this time. I don't understand, Fury gasps, the pistol slacking in his hand. But Emmanuel steps forward, his eyes about to burn. "Oh, but that's the best part. You die never fully understanding. That's part of it," he says with joy, as Fury suddenly bursts into flames, screaming as his skin melts away. "Men like you don't get redemption, Fury. Men like you get replaced," Emmanuel tells him as Fury falls to the floor. His body is a burnt husk. Hulk turns away. "Very good. Here's to the next director of hand having better luck with the Ultimates," he says. Viper nods. "It'll be nice to have a fresh perspective on the problem," she says. But Britain shrugs. "Well, you can hardly call it fresh. I'll never understand why the Maker continues to allow this," Britain notes as the Council moves through the helicarrier, finally arriving at the cloning chamber, where they find rows of Fury clones, all held in stasis. "To tell the truth," Emmanuel notes as he taps some buttons on the console and a fresh Fury begins to thaw, "I think it just makes him smile." Something is coming through the time stream. The Ultimates gathered by Doom have arrived at the plotted arrival point of whatever this danger might be. Wasp looks around skeptically. "Here? You sure, Doom? There's nothing here but corn," she notes as the heroes look around the dark cornfield. The small Doom drone dips its hovering body in a type of knot. "I installed the Triskellion's tachyon detection array myself, Wasp. I am sure," Doom assures her. Captain America looks at the drone, asking if Doom is aware if the Council has their own time machine. "No, not to my knowledge," Doom responds. America Chavez suddenly turns, staring off into the darkness. "Something's coming," she whispers. She begins to walk towards the empty field, rocketing through the fourth dimension, pre-wake of exotic particles as they skim the cosmic superband. She begins to babble to herself. Suddenly, there is a great boom as something rips through the time barrier and slams into the field. A massive ship. The Ultimates scatter as the ship skims along the ground until it finally comes to a rest. The door suddenly opens, and out steps a blue-skinned woman with red hair. The woman looks around for a moment before her eyes fall on America, and she smiles. "We've crossed uncountable eons, pursued by 4D hyper-conquerors through the rise and fall of empires, waded through drowned armies of twisted pseudo-legends, all to find you, America, our America," the woman says as she moves forward, but America takes a step back. Do I know you?" she asks. The woman is shocked. She reaches a hand for America, who pulls away. "We are the Guardians of the Galaxy, the greatest heroes of the 61st century. Know us? You're one of us. We came here on a ship powered by pure hope to save you from this broken past," the woman explains as the rest of her team steps off the ship. Nearby, Wasp glances at the Doom drone. "Are you getting all of this?" she whispers. The drone nods. "I am. It appears they have a time machine too. How interesting," Doom whispers through the drone. The woman reaches for America again, but Steve steps between them, his shield up. "Hey, back off a little, miss. You're being aggressive," he warns. Anger flashes in her eyes, and she blasts him with energy, knocking him back. "This does not concern you," she snaps. Cap struggles to his feet as the rest of the Ultimates rush forward. "Yeah? Well, consider us concerned," Cap growls. Doom sighs through his drone. "Another pointless fight. Who could have predicted?" The Ultimates rush to fight the Guardians, but the blue-haired woman steps forward and shields both herself and America. "You must remember us, America," she insists. She motions to the team, introducing Star-Lord, Master of the Solar System, and Lord of the 12 Houses beyond the sun, as he fights against Giant Man and Wasp. The Ultimate Nullifier, who shot Mephisto through his black heart and erased the concept of eternal suffering from the universe as he fights against She-Hulk, using his pistol to nullify her kinetic energy and stop her momentum. Cosmo Starstalker, the psychic dog who stayed behind to protect humanity as all other canines ascended to a higher state of being. The ultimate good boy. The woman turns back to America. And I'm Captain Marvel, protector of the universe and wielder of the Omnibands, she says. But America shakes her head, pointing out how the Guardians are attacking her friends. Nearby, Captain America throws his shield as he flips through the air, dodging rounds fired by the Ultimate Nullifier. Captain Marvel turns back to Cosmo, asking the canine to use his powers to look into America's mind and restore her shattered memories. Cosmo begins to reach out, but suddenly is knocked back.
Butchers! Her mind, it has been cut open, again and again, with primitive psychic instruments, like performing brain surgery with a rusty saw,
Cosmo snaps. He shakes his head as he looks back at Marvel.
I'm very sorry. Those memories cannot be retrieved. They've amputated our past,
Cosmo explains. But America is still reeling from the intrusion into her mind. She suddenly screams and lashes out with her powers, sending a shockwave of energy through the cornfield and knocking both teams away. "Get out of my head!" she bellows. In moments, the Ultimates are back on their feet. Captain America looks down at Cosmo. "I've never kicked a dog in my life, but after what you just did to America, I'm considering it," he warns. Cosmo pants and wags his tail to show his apologies.
I apologize. We have a more liberal idea about psychic consent where we come from,
Cosmo explains. Meanwhile, the Doom drone is scanning the Guardian's ship, but he is caught by Star-Lord. "Ah, you are not the Doom we know, but there's something familiar about you. Something dangerous," Star-Lord notes. He reaches for the bot and suddenly reaches through the screen and peers at Doom in the Triskelion. Star-Lord stares at Doom, who is surprised by this powerful intrusion. "America belongs with us. Do not attempt to interfere," Star-Lord warns. He glances around the station and stares at the iron lung that holds Tony Stark. Star-Lord ponders for a moment before pulling back through the drone. "The man in the iron mask. The man in the iron lung. Now I remember. One of you will be responsible for untold suffering and the deaths of trillions, and the other could save everything. Now which was which?" Star-Lord says softly. Doom merely looks away and stares at the pod that holds Tony. Back in the field, Captain Marvel is growing frustrated as America pushes her away. "Stop, America, please! If they took your past, I'll give you mine," Marvel says as she reaches out and places a hand on America's forehead. Suddenly, a lifetime flashes before America's eyes, fighting alongside her friends, guarding the galaxy with them, falling in love with Captain Marvel. But America sees something else. Something came to this universe and changed things. The Guardians could sense their universe being destroyed and rewritten, and so they escaped. They created a century arc and saved who they could, piloting 100 years out of an unraveling reality. They escaped creation and its unmaking. Some heroes tried to hold the collapsing reality and managed for a time, but the 61st century fell apart around them, and the Guardians had no choice but to turn around and try to reach the reality that had replaced their own. And when they broke through the barrier, the impact scattered them through time and space. Marvel had landed in the distant past, but she managed to find the remains of their ship and build another, thus beginning her search for the rest of her team. The battle has ended and the other heroes have gathered. Marvel looks to America. I feared you were lost until Cosmo finally caught your scent 5,000 years from now. So we came to rescue you, she finishes softly. She takes a step forward, explaining that once they've rescued their entire team, they will undo the Maker's work and restore some of the rightful future. Hank lets out a cough and holds up his hand for a question. But wouldn't that erase all of us? Like, erase our world the way it erased yours? He asks. Star-Lord holds up a hand and an image appears, showing the two universes. There are ways around that. We have methods of pruning and replanting. Given time, we can save everyone, he explains. Captain Marvel holds out her hand to America. So what do you say? She asks, but America shakes her head. No, she says softly. Captain Marvel is shocked, but America reaches out and puts her hand on the woman's shoulders. She explains that the memories she shared were beautiful, and she has no doubt that they loved each other. I believe that I love you, but I don't know you. I don't remember everything, but I remember that I am a part of something important here, and that I've committed myself to saving the future this way. The Maker comes out of the city in 10 months. We're going to be ready for him. We're going to fix the world. But Marvel shakes her head. Haven't you been listening? We know this world's future. We've been there, seen it with our own eyes. You lose, America. The Unmaker wins, Marvel tries to explain. But America smiles at her. Maybe, but the future can change. We're proof of that, aren't we? America tells her. Marvel finally gives up the argument and hands America a small device. At least take this temporal flare. Whenever we are, we will see it. And when you need us, we'll be there. This isn't goodbye, Captain Marvel says as the Guardians return to their ship. You've broken my heart, but my purpose remains intact. There are other Guardians stranded out there, and we can't rest until we've found them all, Marvel calls out. Before boarding, she takes one last look at America. Good luck, America. I do not envy you. I've seen this world's future. It's all impossible choices and tragic outcomes, she says. Meanwhile, aboard the Triskelion, Doom reaches out for the iron lung that holds Tony Stark, staring at the young hero within. Only 10 months remain until the Makers return. 2005, Seagate Penitentiary. Carl Lucas, Luke Cage, looks down at the handcuffs on his wrists, and then at the man that sits across from him. 1 year to life, but I'm only 15, Luke says. The man shrugs, explaining that it could be worse. He could have gotten 5 years, but you'll be out as soon as a year, the man explains. Luke shakes his head, disbelief still spread across his face. But I don't even know what I've been convicted of, he exclaims. The man shrugs. Well, neither do I, but convicted you were, and it was an administrative trial. I don't really know the details. I'm not a lawyer, the man exclaims. 2025, Gordium Correctional Facility. Luke Cage is led into the cafeteria. Overhead, the loudspeakers remind the prison population that their global citizenship has been revoked and that they have no rights of any kind. Obey the law, follow the rules, stay out of trouble, and there will be no problems, the loudspeaker explains. We hope your stay will be productive. 2006, Seagate Penitentiary. Luke Cage keeps his head down, trying to avoid a beating from the guards. He works out, getting bigger, getting stronger. 2025. Luke whirls and hits another prisoner in the chow line, knocking the man down and kicking his shiv away. Whoa! Danny Rand, the man Luke saved, says in shock. But Danny quickly turns back to the chow line. Listen, man. Thanks for the help, but Word of advice from someone who's been here a while? Mind your own business and watch your own back, because no one's gonna watch it for you, Danny says. Luke smiles and reaches for an apple. Nah, not my style, he says. 2010, Seagate Penitentiary. Luke Cage keeps working. He studies, trying to better himself, get stronger. He can't stay away from the guards much longer, and the beatings come. 2025. Luke works in the prison. They use the prisoners as free labor, but Luke has had enough, and he gathers the other like-minded prisoners. They've made us into non-people. They say it's about justice. They say it's about the law. It's not about any of that. It's about power, he explains to those who will listen. 2014, Seagate Penitentiary. Luke's doors open, and a group of guards walk in, batons at the ready. We hear you're a real go-getter, Cage. Forming your own prison gang? They growl. Luke gets to his feet, trying to explain that it's just a reading group, but the baton swings and hits Luke at the knees, bringing him down. You're a troublemaker and a dangerous element. It's in your file. It's been in your file since you were born. The guards snap as they surround Luke and raise their weapons, bringing the batons down again and again until they are covered in blood. Stupid convicts never learn, one of them puffs as they walk out of the cell, leaving Luke in a pool of his own blood on the floor. 2025. Luke has gathered those around him, explaining that they can no longer be fighting amongst themselves, that it has to be the prisoners versus the guards. Us and them. The guards are our enemy here. Our most immediate struggle is with them. If we are to succeed in our struggle, you'll have to fight for the life of the man next to you as if they were your own, which it is. Luke tells them, showing them that they are playing chess, that strategy is the only way to win. January 2024, Seagate Penitentiary. While other inmates talk about how Cage was unbreakable, Luke was visited in his cell by a strange glowing box that appeared in a burst of energy. 2025. Luke has laid out the plan. They have gathered the plans for the prison, found the weak points, gathered his followers, explaining that the only way to beat the system is to destroy it and build something different, something better. We must take power back for the people, many of whom will first be afraid of us. That's okay. We are going to scare them, not to death, but to life. We go tomorrow, Luke tells his followers. January 2024. The glowing box suddenly opens, revealing a hologram of Tony Stark. Luke Cage, this is for you. A catalyst. Ionic catalyst that will allow you to gain unbreakable skin and unbelievable strength. Tony explains as a glowing orb floats up. Luke reaches for it, and an energy pulses over him as he is transformed. Together, we will free the world, Tony says as blue light fills Luke's cell. They stole your future, robbed you of your destiny. Do you want it back? Tony asks. 2025, Gordium Correctional Facility. Luke and his followers have been captured. They are chained and led out into the yard. A prison break? You thought you could hide a prison break from us? One of the guards asks as he readies his weapon. The prisoners are led to the wall and made to face the firing line. If any of you could be trusted, you wouldn't be criminals now, would ya? It's just in your nature. Just because you break the law doesn't make you a criminal. A criminal is just something you are. Well, something you were, the guard says as they raise their weapons. They open fire and spray rounds into the group, but they are focused on Luke, the leader of the bunch. But when the smoke clears, Luke is still standing,
smiling at them. "All right, gentlemen, we're taking over now," Luke says to his followers.
January 2024. Luke crashes through the wall of Seagate Penitentiary, leading the prisoners in a full-scale riot, leading them to victory. 2025. He breaks through the chains with a simple flex and moves forward, smashing the ground and throwing the guards away.
"Follow the plan! All power to the people!"
Luke shouts to his followers, and the chant is picked up throughout the prison. June 2024. Tony Stark hovers over the prison and speaks with Luke Cage, who now runs things. "Congratulations on taking the prison and freeing yourselves, Mr. Cage, and welcome to the Ultimates. You're one of the few of the first generation who worked out. We can get you out of here." Tony begins to explain, but Luke shakes his head, believing that he can do more from the inside. "I don't understand. After all you've endured?" Tony asks. Luke nods his head, making sure that he is sent to Gordium Correctional next. "Because of all I've endured, I know I can't get free until everybody's free," Luke explained to Tony. February 2025, on the Triskelion satellite, Leori leans over the stasis tank that is healing Tony Stark. With a tear in her eye, she tells Tony that she needs to return to her people, but she also knows that Tony needs her. She reaches out a hand and places it against the glass that protects Tony's body. "This is why you cannot die. You made me a promise to help my people. You made us all a promise, and I know you will keep it," Leori whispers as she turns and walks away. Inside the tank, Tony is left alone, but suddenly, his eyes flash open. Only 9 months remain until the Makers return. Jim accesses his memories and stares at the man in front of him, the man responsible for plunging the world into war and the deaths of millions of people. The fire leaps from Jim, burning the man alive, the smoke choking off his screams of pain until he finally turns to ash in his hands. In the present day, Jim Hammond turns to his team. "So, how'd it feel to kill Hitler?" Wasp asks. The Human Torch looks at her. "How did it feel?" he asks. A small smile begins to play over his mouth as he explains that over the years, he's had to delete memories to keep his systems moving at optimal speed. His Medal of Honor, friends, family, even playing the piano, all gone. But that memory, I keep it in full color and high definition. I go back to it again and again. It keeps me warm, the Torch tells her with a full smile. Cap looks up from scouting the Red Skull base in front of them. "All right, enough reminiscing about the good old days of killing Nazis, because we've got to go kill some Nazis right now," Steve tells them as he motions to the massive Red Skull compound that lays before them. The Red Skulls are a terrorist organization that has taken root in the North American Union, having been inspired by the Nazi super soldier Johann Schmidt, and taken the tactics and iconography of the 1970s vigilante known as the Punisher. Now, they are scattered across the United States and under the control of the 5th Grand Skull. The team moves in quietly, scaling the walls instead of a direct assault, worried about the families that live in the compound. Suddenly, Steve's comms beep to life. "Tony, you're supposed to be in surgery," Steve reminds their leader quietly. Back on the Triskelion, Tony is hovering in the air as the machines work on his spine. "I am. The Immortus engine is keeping me stable. The pain isn't too bad. As long as I have something to focus on," Tony gasps. He questions why the team is taking the time to attack the Red Skulls, as they have nothing to do with the Council or the Maker, and so they aren't a priority. But Steve shakes his head as he drops into the compound. I've received information that connects this organization to the Hand, and Nazis are always a priority. It's all one fight, Tony, Steve says softly. The Human Torch covers the compound in a thick smoke as the team drops in. Cap moves fast, knocking several guards out before they can raise the alarm. Meanwhile, Wasp and Giant Man shrink down, slipping into the ear canal of 2 other guards and dropping them. Hawkeye also joins in, firing his arrows and dropping more guards without a sound. In moments, the compound is cleared and the team pushes into the main command building. The doors swing inward and the team finds themselves in a massive chamber. Steve and Jim stop short. Their eyes widen as they stare up at the trophies on the wall. Hanging up on the wall, well lit so that everyone can see, is the body of Namor, the Submariner, the king of the ocean. Suddenly, a side curtain is pulled away. The gang's all here. It's an invaders reunion, the Grand Skull says with joy as he steps out, a rifle in hand and a small army at his back. Jim floats into the air and hovers close to his old friend on the wall. It's him. It's really him, Jim whispers. The Grand Skull nods as he stalks forward. King Namor, the Submariner. Yes, it's really him. Though I'm afraid he's lost his infamous vigor, the Skull says. He looks at the heroes, staring at Captain America. You weren't supposed to find out about him. I wasn't ready for you yet, the Skull says. Jim stares at the villain. His computer brain is trying to recognize the voice patterns, but the Skull's helmet distorts his words. Jim floats down to the floor, landing before the Skull. How did you kill him? Jim demands, but the Skull shakes his head. I did not, he says, explaining that Namor's death was part of a political coup in Atlantis. A group rose up against their Mad King and killed him, but his body refused to decay, and Namor was worshipped by his followers. They claim the ocean's microorganisms refuse to eat the body, that even in death, every living thing in the ocean recognized its rightful king, the Skull says as he looks up at the body. He turns back to the heroes and raises his weapon. It wasn't my idea to mount him, by the way. That was the last guy. A real collector, very into big game, the Grand Skull tells them. Though he admits that having the body of one of their greatest enemies does help with recruitment. Down there, he's a miracle. Up here, he's a joke. The fish that never rots, the Skull hisses. Jim suddenly ignites in anger. His fire grows hotter as Steve steps forward and readies his shield. Ultimates, this is what we trained for. Clear the room, Steve shouts as he rushes forward. And in a matter of moments, it's over. The heroes are too strong for the group of Nazis, and seeing his forces defeated, the Grand Skull turns and rushes away. Somebody get him down from there, Cap snaps as he runs after the enemy. I'm going to break open that skull, Steve growls as he enters the Grand Skull's room. But the Grand Skull whirls and fires a grenade launcher, which Cap easily deflects with his shield. Jim flies into the room, avoiding the Skull's fire. But suddenly, a door opens to reveal a massive soldier wearing a Red Skull shirt. Here's one of our true believers now. His name is John Walker, the Grand Skull says, telling the heroes that John came to them with a vial of super soldier serum and a message from Tony Stark about how he was supposed to be a hero. Walker lets out a bellow of rage as he rushes forward with a knife in each hand. But the Human Torch turns to him and lets out a blast of fire that cooks Walker's head, dropping him to the ground and ending the fight in seconds. Jesus, Jim, Steve whispers as the other heroes join them. The Grand Skull pauses for a moment in his defeat, but he fires his weapon again. The laser blast deflects off Cap's shield and ricochets back at him, cracking his helmet and dropping him to the ground. Steve stalks forward, but the Grand Skull doesn't seem upset.
Good gravy. It looks like you've got me. Captain America's done it again.
The Grand Skull says as he taps the Red Skull pin on his chest. Cap looks down at him, now able to see one of his eyes. The eye of an older man.
I'm just a symbol, Cap, and symbols don't die. They just come back different.
The Grand Skull says as he begins to disappear.
It was good to see you, Steve.
The skull whispers before completely disappearing. Afterwards, the Ultimates retrieve the body of Namor and return it to the ocean, giving the sea back its king so that he might inspire revolution even in death. The heroes return to the Triskelion and rest, but Jim Hammond doesn't rest. He has no need for it. He wanders the corridors of the station, looking back on his memories, but there is another who doesn't sleep. Steve Rogers has merely looked out his window since their battle. Jim is able to read facial cues with his new systems and knows that his old friend is troubled. Jim looks back on the battle, looking for something that he could have missed. His systems finally find a match for the Grand Skull's voice, with 90% certainty.
It was good to see you, Steve,
the Grand Skull had said through his cracked helmet before he disappeared. But now, Jim's systems recognize the voice. Steve looks out the window of his room, looking down on planet Earth, when it dawns on him.
Bucky?
He whispers softly. Lightning cracks in the sky as thunder rumbles. A flash of Nordic light symbols spark the ground as Thor and Sif arrive on Nidavellir. There, they find the dwarven smiths have been enslaved, forced to work assembly lines by the likes of Loki and those who command him. But Thor and Sif search for Brock and Atri, asking them to craft cloaks to hide them in their quest to overthrow the Allfather. The dwarven smiths agree, though they ask for Loki's head in payment. Thor and Sif shake on the agreement, promising to provide the cleaved head of the god of lies. And so, armed with the cloaks, the pair begin their reconnaissance. They find Loki sitting upon the throne of Asgard, growing fat and lazy from mead and immortal apples. Though he rules the 9 realms, both Thor and Sif know that he is merely a puppet for the Maker. Beside the throne, Odin's head sits on a spear. Preserved, it spouts nonsense visions of the future, and the young Idun is chained, forced to serve as Loki's cupbearer. The steps of the throne are crowded with Asgardians, pleading for the immortal apples, begging for their long lives to be made longer, waiting for Loki's whims to give them. Next, Thor and Sif journey to the halls of Valhalla, where Queen Hela watches as the great feasts are not eaten by great warriors, but by the undead Draugr that she provides for Loki's armies. They journey to Alfheim, where the Light Elves, the source of creativity and divine inspiration, have been chained to their desks and forced to create content over art. They are watched by black-suited and gray-skinned bosses. The heroes travel to Vanaheim and speak with the Lord of the Fertile Fields. They have remained free, and so they choose not to aid the heroes, believing that since Loki's rule has not affected them, they should not aid the heroes. Disheartened, Thor and Sif seek shelter in a Vanir retreat. There, alone, they embrace one another. Long have they fought side by side, but now they stand together as lovers. But when Sif awakens, she discovers that Thor has disappeared. He quickly returns, but shows signs of weakness. His body smells of sulfur, and his hand burns and smolders. Thor refuses to speak on where he has been, and so once again, the two settle into a life of silence. Without aid, Thor has no chance. He journeys to Jotunheim alone, bringing thunder and calling down lightning from the sky, making war against the frost giants. Loki doesn't want to appear weak, and so has no choice but to pull his body from the throne and journey to meet this aggression. But Thor's actions are a ruse. The throne is left unguarded, and Sif is a great warrior. She clears the throne room of Draugr and rescues Idun, freeing her and taking the basket of immortal apples away. Now, hidden in the darkness of Niflheim, Thor and Sif begin to gather Asgardian warriors, offering them the immortal apples, finally gathering warriors to aid them in the war against the Allfather. Loki returns to his throne to discover what has happened. He rages across the 9 realms, declaring that he has been too soft and forgiving on those he rules over. But Thor and Sif are ready. They have gathered their forces and prepared to make war. But where did Thor disappear to after his night of passion with Sif? He knew that they would need more aid against Loki, knew that if Asgard could not be liberated, it must fall. So he journeyed to Muspelheim. He walked across the bridges over the boiling seas of lava and stood before Lord Surtur. The Flame Lord smiled and held out a hand, clasping Thor in a burning agreement, and approved of his request. "Burn it all down," Thor rumbled. Meanwhile, back aboard the Triskelion, Tony has called Doom into his healing chamber. He realizes that something has happened, that the Ultimates should have fallen during their battle with Hulk. Maybe they did. Tony motions to an image of the Hulk standing over their broken bodies, She-Hulk's head in his hand. "Explain," Tony demands of Doom. The hand helicarrier floats through the night sky. The current director, Fury, leans back in the chair at his desk. "It's dangerous for me, talking to you," the informant says, but Fury just nods. "You have nothing to worry about. You're protected, sheltered in the palm of hand. Now, what have you got for me?" The informant pauses for a moment before finally sighing and beginning their story. "Tony, Iron Lad, called a meeting," they begin. A few days earlier, Tony Stark calls his Ultimates together and shows them the video recording. Everyone gasps as they watch their deaths at the hands of the Hulk and his warriors. This is what happened, Tony tells them as they watch him get his skull crushed, as Captain America gets a shield to the stomach. "That's my nightmare. How did you get footage of it?" Hank asks. But it is She-Hulk who shakes her head and explains that she's had the same nightmare. Tony turns and glares at their Reed Richards, at the man they call Doom. Tell them, or I will," Tony snaps at him. But Doom says nothing, his head lowered and his arms crossed in defiance. Tony gives him a few moments before finally nodding. "Fine," he hisses. He turns back to the team, explaining that when he fused the Immortus engine to his nervous system, thus freezing himself a microsecond before death, he's been catching up on what he missed. He turns back to the screen and watches the replay again, watching as the heroes fall before the might of the Hulk and his forces. "The engine allows me to see through time. Sometimes. I'm still figuring things out," Tony says. They watch as Iron Lad is smashed between Hulk's hands. His armor crumpled around his body. Hulk moves on to She-Hulk, lifting her by her hair and slicing off her head with his hand. When I looked back on that day, I saw two versions of the events, superimposed like two competing signals. One in which Doom got us out just in time, and one in which he didn't, he says as the image shifts. And suddenly, the Ultimates are watching themselves be saved, teleported away by Doom just before their deaths. But then the image shifts back again, and each hero watches as they die at the hands of Hulk or his followers. The Wasp is squashed. Hawkeye is burned alive. A man-shaped hole is punched through the chest of Giant Man. Finally, Doom turns to them and speaks. "It was very messy," he says with a sigh. "By the time I found you, what I found was unacceptable. So I intervened," he explains, as they watch Thor be kicked again and again until his bones finally break and his organs burst. "That didn't have to be what happened. I saved your lives. You are welcome," Doom tells them all, but the heroes are in shock. They can't comprehend that they died, or that Doom lied to them about it. Tony steps forward and glares at him. "You've been lying to us, Doom. You've been lying to all of us, and you broke our agreement," Tony reminds him. But now, Doom becomes angry, jabbing a finger at Tony. "I saved your lives. Everything I have done for the cause," he snaps. But Tony shakes his head. He knows that Doom has been working on something called Project 4. Something that will allow him to break through the Maker's time barrier so that he can go back far enough to stop all of the changes that the Maker has made to this world. "If you want contrition, I'm afraid the capacity was long ago cut out of me. I am Doom. You must accept this, and all it means, as I have," Doom tells them. But America steps forward, reminding Doom that he could erase this world with his meddling. But Doom whirls on her, anger in his voice now. "And what in this world is so worth saving? Tell me!" he demands. He points to them all, explaining that he is trying to fix the world that was broken. Tony looks back to the video, watching as Hulk crushes his body again. "Just tell me, is that why you took us out after Were you trying to cover your tracks?" he asks. But Doom shakes his head. The anger left him. He looks at Tony with almost sadness. He motions to the screen as Tony falls to the ground, his armor and body shattered. "I tried, Tony. It wasn't just separate time and space. I had to save you without uncreating myself. Or this version of myself," Doom says, explaining that he tried saving them even before they entered the chamber, but he couldn't. The math only allowed him to save them when he did. He holds up his hands in defeat to the rest of the team. "It won't work without you. None of it works without all of us. I had to save you, even if it meant risking," Doom says, pleading with them to understand. Finally, Tony puts a hand on his shoulder. "Doom, it's okay," he says. But Doom shakes his head, explaining that nothing they're doing is working and they're running out of time. They only have 6 months left until the Maker's return. "The engine lets you see into the past. What about the future? Can you confirm?" Doom asks as he turns back to Tony. But Tony shakes his head, revealing that when he tries to look past the Maker's return, he only sees white. "That's ominous," America points out. Doom nods as he steps in front of the screen. He knows that if he breaks through the Maker's barrier, he can save his family and fix the world that was taken from them. "I will make a better world in this one's place, even if there is no place for me in it. A world without Doom," he says. He points at them, reminding them that they speak of revolution and fixing the world, but nothing they've done so far has worked. You refuse to take the necessary steps. This world is a prison. What do you have to lose but your chains? That is why I lied. I knew you would not approve, but I knew that I was right. Radical action and imagination are what are called for now. I assure you, I have thought this through, he says. The heroes stare at him for a moment before Tony finally nods. Okay, he says. Okay? Doom says in disbelief. Okay, I believe you, and I trust you, Tony says. He nods and motions to the group, explaining that he didn't call the meeting to put Doom on trial. We just needed to get everything out into the open, so we could decide on the future of this thing, together, Tony explains. Finally, Captain America stands. He's been silent this entire time, but he finally steps forward. Doom's right, he says, shocking everyone. This isn't working, but I don't think trying to break through the barrier is any better, he says. He looks at everyone, agreeing that nothing they've tried has worked so far, that they aren't a match for the Council as they are. He looks to America Chavez and Luke Cage and acknowledges that their tactics have been working. We need a more active outreach. We need to expand the network rapidly. We need to give the people something to fight for, something to die for, if need be, Steve says. Tony nods and turns back to their blackboard, crossing off the Ultimates version 2.0 and writing in Ultimates 3.0. Okay, the Ultimates 2.0 is dissolved. Let's make sure the next one's better, Tony says with a smile. Back in the present, Nick Fury nods at the end of the story. All dead? Shame it didn't stick, he grunts. He looks down at the palm of his hand and smiles. Present company excluded, of course. He tells Janet Van Dyne. He smiles at her. Don't worry, I am a man of my word. When the time comes, you and your husband will be spared, Mrs. Van Dyne, he promises. He thanks her for the information. Thank you for participating in Hans' Informant Program. We'll be in touch, he tells her. 6 months remain. And that was the full story for Ultimates, issues 1 through 12 by Deniz Camp. What did you think about today's full story? Let me know in the comments below. And like and subscribe to help the channel in that YouTube algorithm. I'm Dan with Comicstorian, and we will see you next time. Rest in peace, Benny.